Look out. All right, with next presentation is Doc, and I think Paul is the good-looking part of the presentation, I believe. But they're going to talk about demystifying the learning of Morse code. And I think with Doc's encouragement and Ian's encouragement down the back there, I will take a paddle up to a summit one day and give it a crack, I think. So, over to you, Doc.
Can I have that in writing? Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. There's no PowerPoint today for a couple of reasons. One is I thought you might be just about mortified by them, with all due respect to all the PowerPoints, because they are a powerful transmitter of messages. The other thing is I'm going to be talking about a topic that is not visual. Morse is not a visual thing, unless you've got a digital reader. It's a doey thing. So before I go any further, can I just ask you to maybe stand up, just humour the old guy. Stand up, just get some circulation back in your pins. See if you can restore those cute backsides to some sort of roundness rather than being flat. You got me.
You're going to ask him to stand up those who use a key or a paddle.
No. Just move the legs, the knees around a little bit, get the salt dam out. Or rust in some people's cases.
Yes.
Paul Hoffman and I have had a couple of discussions about this topic, and we've agreed that Paul's going to make the tail end of this presentation, because I'm going to talk about introducing a concept of approaching Morse so that it is in fact demystified. And Paul has some very useful ideas that are worth sharing with all of you, that put a local context on how some of the strategies and things that we might engage with to help promote code reading, learning, and make it easier. So you've all learned about the computer logging today, so I've got my computerised thing right here, but I've got a special software that makes it come out like handwriting, so I got the best of both worlds. Now, the raging psychologist in me continually looks for ways to demystify anything. And as an educator, I've always tried to find ways to enable people to learn at their own rate, using methods, strategies, techniques that work for them rather than a one-size-fits-all. Now, there are a number of us in this room who started out life as professional telegraphists. Military, PMG, OTC, etc. And we were, I'll use the word forcibly, coercion might be a kind of one, but in order to achieve the qualifications to be able to do those jobs, we actually got forcibly immersed or indoctrinated with certain aspects, one of them being the transmission and reception of Morse code. And in those days, most of it was done hydraulically. The Spanish method, manual. Now there are many, many options, and I know those of you who have a look at it, have a play with it and get serious with it are using the different options. That's fine. What I'm talking about today is really a narrow channel of it, and I'm talking about getting away from some of the barriers that have been in the road of people who've maybe wanted to learn Morse code or thought they wanted to, but more importantly, years ago, they had to do it to get what was called a full license. There's the first barrier, isn't it? Somebody says before you can have HF privileges, you must be able to read Morse code 14 words a minute. Then it was 10. The novice came along, it was 5. But speed is really irrelevant. It's something, again, that's forced on people, and it takes control. Morse code, to me, is my second language. You might speak Italian or Swahili, I don't, but I speak Morse. It's my musical instrument. You might play the piano, the guitar, the oboe, I don't. But Morse code is my music because it's based on rhythm and timing. So in the old days, we would sit down we'd listen to slow Morse, tapes, off air, whatever. There's another barrier, psychological barrier. It's slow Morse. So I'm not as good as the other people. I'm down here, I'm just reading slow Morse. So cumulatively, without me going into any more detail, there are a few of these barriers that roll in and actually prevent people from even considering Morse code as a mode of operation. Okay. I'd like to hang the concept on you that if you are thinking about Morse code, either returning to it after a protracted absence or taking it up for the first time, that you consider it to be learning a new language or learning to play a musical instrument by ear. I don't want the sight reading of music to get in the road of this, with all due respect to it. Let's think about learning a new language. Let's think about learning the old language. What about the language that we all mutilate on a day-to-day basis? How do we learn that? Mimicking. From being very, very small, but very, very focused on learning stuff, we picked up from hearing people around us using words, turning them into sentences, etc. So we're actually quite expert at this process. All we need to do, I'm suggesting, is think about channeling that to the Morse code. We don't have to aspire to be professional telegraphists anymore. We don't have to pass a Morse code exam. So I say, why do we have to write it down? We don't. And by write down, I mean on a keyboard as well. What I'm suggesting to you is give some thought to starting to learn to read Morse. Let it come into your head. Take on what your brain will let you take on today. Doesn't matter if you miss the rest. And I'm talking about you listening to other people's transmissions. Listen to stuff that's not important to you. Just get a feel for the sound. Without the pressure and that mental switching from listen, right, listen, right. Just listen, listen, listen. See if you can start to make some sense. You might not make a lot of sense of it for a start, but stay with it. It's like when you first learned to say dad, mum, dog, cat. We're going back to basics. And hopefully some of you get past that. I take it we've got a struggler among us. So that's my rationale for changing your paradigm, or perhaps considering changing your approach to the whole topic, is because you don't have to do it. Nobody's going to look at your written version of it. All you have to do is make some sense about what someone is saying. Bear in mind that these days, when you have a contact on the air, initially it's unlikely that you're going to go into repeating great chunks out of literature. You're going to be exchanging some basic information. So here we might make some exceptions, that we might log/write down call sign of the other station. That'd be pretty handy, wouldn't it? Operator's name, RST report, and there might be something else. It might be grid squares or something else that's important to you. This is this individualised thing. So we write down the key points, and of course we note the time of the contact. That's enough. Then just try to listen and follow what's happening. The other thing that used to happen was that receiving Morse was always done separately to transmitting. And I've never understood why. Because to me the two go together, because one reinforces the other. And I would be suggesting that immediately if someone decides they want to upgrade their Morse ability or take up Morse for the first time, get yourself a comfortable little key or your keyer that's built in, whatever it's going to be, and have it some means of receiving so you can do both together. And as you start to learn the symbols and the numbers for a start, I don't know that there's a best way to do that. Different people have told me that if they learn opposites like F and L, that helps them learn it. Other people have told me just the same, that they get confused and get it mixed up all the time. And You've got to find a way that works for you. You might just go from A to Z, learning 5 a day or 6 a day, and then the number's 1 to 0. You find a system that works and use it. But putting the transmission and reception together means that every time you sit down with your Kia or your Kia, you are reinforcing this auditory process, this sound process, the learning of the language, the learning of the music. And if you're doing some reading, if you're doing, got a bat flattery. We still going? If we keep reinforcing the sounds of the symbols, we take it on board just like learning the language. Now here's one from left field for you. One of the strategies that the Navy got us to use was that every time we were making our way around the training establishment, doing our initial telegraphist course, we'd be marching in a squad, and every time we came to anything that was like a billboard or a sign, as a squad we had to chant out what the words were in Morse. So I go across to this Probus Club, board across there, if you have a look on your left, and I'd be saying to myself, da 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 da. Why would I do that? So I sound like a dickhead. That's just an extra outcome. But with everyone in the squad doing it, no one was a dickhead. Well, we had lots of dickheads. My invitation to you is, when you're driving, and there are signs, billboards, number plates, don't do it in your head. It's not dit-da, da, dit-dit-dit. It doesn't sound like that. It's da-da, da-da-dit-dit, da-da-da-dit. Say them out loud. Wind your window up, people won't think, dickhead. And you can just smile at the world. Show them you've got cramp in one finger. So we're looking at auditory repetition, because that's how you learn a language. At the risk of being highly repetitive, that's how you learn to play an instrument by ear. You hear it, you repeat it. You hear it, you repeat it. The other thing that's complicated life for people, and has been a barrier, as some of you guys have told me, is this focus on speed that I mentioned before. And where you have barrier speeds in exams and things, automatically that's the big portcullis coming down, isn't it? We haven't got those, so that's terrific. I'd suggest to you, you don't worry about what the number of words per minute is or are. All you do is take on board the learning of the rhythm, the timing, the symbols, and how it flows so that you can interpret what somebody is saying. If you need to get somebody to slow down, you send QRS, please. I'll be very disappointed if we've got operators on the air today that won't slow down if you ask them to. If you're learning it and you miss stuff, doesn't matter. Go and find something else. Let what you've missed go. You're learning it. You're not expected to be, don't have an expectation of self that you're going to get 100% copy because you've now made your mind up to learn it, because it may not happen, probably won't happen. Just copy what you can copy. What did that mean? And ask somebody, what's it mean when somebody says PSE? Please. Oh, you're learning a new language. When you're operating phone, you don't say PSE, OM. You have another lingo for operating on phone, don't you? So every genre has its own lingo. So if you can just hang on to the fact that learning Morse requires you to want to learn it, because you no longer have to. If you want to learn something, then you will commit what you can, when you can, in a way you can that suits you, and therefore you give yourself the best chance of learning it. It needs to be repetitive and it needs to be auditory. I would suggest to you, and I'm quite happy people want to disagree with this, if you could allocate 5 minutes a day, but not an hour a week, please. It needs to be a little bit often. We used to get saturated with 40 minutes in the morning, 40 minutes in the afternoon. That was a make or break situation. You don't need that. 5 minutes. Read some number plates out. Read some signs. Just a repetitive, incremental database build up in here of recognition.
Thank you.
The motivation needs to come from you because nobody can learn it for you. If somebody says they have a best method, this worked for me, oh, listen respectfully, that's fine, but I still think you need to find something that works for you. I have had some people ask me about having some more sessions, maybe in the shack, maybe somewhere else. 630 metres has been suggested by some because they feel self-conscious and they figure that one of the frequency bands with perhaps not the greatest distance of propagation gives them some feeling of privacy. It's all open to options. Talking about options, Paul, where are you? Oh, you see that? I knew that. I hope I've left you enough time to do your bit, but talking about options, I'd like you to have a listen to what Paul's got to say. Thanks, mate.
Okay, thanks guys. And, thanks for your presentation. Just a few quick things on top of what David's already said. I can't profess to be a Morse proponent of any quality kind of thing, and I try and I kind of wander away and come back again. And I did get up to about just under 20 words a minute at one stage talking with dear old Ray, BK5UI, up at Murray Bridge when he was alive. He's now a silent key, unfortunately. And he was an ex-PMG telegraphist, and he could bash away quite easily. Fortunately, he had a pretty good ear, I think, and probably struggled with a lot of what I sent, but he did interpret it nonetheless. So it was good. But I struggled and I fell in a lot of holes. I was VK5 XPH to start off with. Then I got 5 words a minute, KPH. I think I fell in every pothole that you could probably find along the way, including reading text and things like that, looking at Morse code visually, and then trying to do an interpretation in my head. And really, it's been a problem for me to pick up and understand Morse along the way. But I would like to get going better. And as David was saying, why is there an interest in Morse code? And especially in America, people thought that the end of the Morse requirement would signal the death knell for Morse code. There's more and more people interested in it now because you don't have to do it. That's the amazing thing. As David said, there was pressure to do it to get your HF privilege and to have Morse code. Now it's not required. You know what? I'm going to learn it. So a lot of people having a bit of a bash. The other thing is there's been a resurgence in interest in QRP and homebrew stuff. That means that to extend the range any real distance, and that Morse code's probably king to get out and get long distance. Having said that, we've got people here, Wolf, for example, 4-watt amp radio talking to Vancouver on sideband, which is pretty incredible. But we can get going even further maybe with CW. Simplified rigs. So we are talking back to basics and 1 and 2 transistor devices that lend themselves to running on CW. I live up at Glen Osmond and that. Unfortunately, I've got a noise floor about S8 on 80 metres quite often. And anything other than CW is probably not going to get through very well. And as David was saying, it's a challenge of you learning a new language. So we had a bit of a crack. Trevor Quick has been keen to get something going, as has Ian and a few others around the place. But unfortunately, you need to get some kind of critical mass together to get something happening. And it's no good having a net consisting of, say, 3 people when one person drops off because they're busy that night or going out or something, or someone's sick, then we don't get any communication happening at all. That's not good. So you need enough participants to keep it running like any other net. Also, we're struggling with frequencies. We did try 2 metres, and that wasn't too bad. We had some people over the hill though that couldn't get through. So maybe the lower the frequencies and that might get around the place. And I think the greatest thing for me is self-consciousness and coming up on air. It's okay to talk on the radio, and everyone can do that reasonably well. However, coming up with Morse code and sounding like a galoot or whatever, probably not all that, a little bit self-conscious and probably don't let things go. I take my hat off to Herbie, who started off at about the same time and was bashing away 10 or 12 words a minute, now he's well over 30. He's been lucky enough to be able to get out and embrace people in QSOs and just take off, and he's run with it, and then he's worked around that self-consciousness thing. It's still a stumbling block for me. I'd like to see some training sessions possibly, and we have done a little bit, had a bit of a bash one time with a tabletop session and people around the table, and that worked okay. There wasn't any much stress, you're amongst friends, and it's only propagating within the room. That seemed to work okay, and obviously we didn't have too many propagation problems. The COP technique, there's a lot of computer-aided software around now that makes things a lot easier. So once upon a time you would need to have a dedicated person sending you Morse code to actually learn these things. So he's a psychologist, and it came up around the middle 30s with a technique to actually get Morse code into commercial operators fairly quickly, and he handpicked some students that had them doing reasonable Morse code in about 13.5 hours. His theory was, as David was saying, was to transmit at normal speed, but just pick up a few words at a time, just so, like you'd learn French, you learn bonjour or something like that, you don't learn how to say it very slowly over the space of 5 minutes. So his idea was to get a couple of letters together, do them really well. When you get about 90% accuracy, incorporate another letter and run on with it. One thing I haven't really been able to do properly, and that's go to paperless receive. That would be really good. When I sent up to poor old Ray, for example, he would say, yeah, I'll copy that fairly well, but he'd just write down the salient points. He wouldn't write down the whole conversation. That's smart. And yeah, developing conversation Morse things. So initially I started off reading something out of an encyclopedia or something, a chapter off to him, sending that Morse code, and he'd pick up the points out of that and relay them back to me. But towards the end I got to the stage where I could actually send him some conversational stuff, and that was fantastic to be able to talk just on the fly. So I hit the 10 word per minute plateau, I must say, and using cheat sheets and cards and things like that, where you're trying to convert things into signs or symbols or something, and then back into words is not good. You need to be able to understand the words as they sound. So tapes and stuff, you end up memorising those. QSOs and that, sometimes people don't send that well, makes it difficult and you get discouraged. So now we've got software out there, and some of those are good. I'll go with those quickly. There's some basic keys you can get around. I mean, I've got one like this, not too bad, an English one, but you can make up, and I've made up a few like this with the little bug, and that was just on a bottle cap with paper clips, and that works okay in a computer interface or in your actual radio. G4 font, that's one that sends COP method, and you can actually just get it to incorporate an extra letter every once in a while till you build up a proficiency, then you incorporate another letter till you get all the letters, and then you start working on the alphabet and punctuation. CW.com, that's one system that lets you talk through the internet. You can actually pick up a port or a channel, and you can talk to other people around the world. I talked to a guy over in Texas on Morse code. Unfortunately, when you start keying into that system, it puts the letters up in capitals, and they know you're typing into the keyboard rather than, and he said, look, if you're going to do that, I'll stop. So I had to keep persisting with the key. But that is interesting, and they've also got news feeds there, so you can listen to current news in Morse code at different rates. So this gives you something else to listen to that's a little bit more topical. So Learn CW Online, that's another one. So that's got all options up there, and they tend to use the COP method as well. There's plenty of software around where we could actually take some text and convert it into CW, which would be good. Project Gutenberg's got a whole lot of text there, stories and things that we can maybe use to convert. And I'm thinking about the beacon down the road. QRP, so lots of people are wanting to do this now, and Morse code is a useful adjunct to that. And we can draw on the experience from the guys that are out there with antennas and all those systems. The beacon, how long's this NERC beacon been silent, Trevor? It's been a few years now, we're ashamed to say, but quite a few. So the poor old girl's not running anymore. It probably should be. So we're thinking about maybe trying to get the beacon up and running. I've got a little Raspberry Pi at home, and Kerry Dreeland wrote up some software, and it'll transmit Morse code fairly cleanly without all the nasty noises on there. And Trevor was able to hear that, and it was just running barefoot, just with an antenna from my house, I'm not sure how many milliwatts it was sending out, but he was able to receive Morse code up to his place. And that's capable of sending out FM. So that's not too bad. So where we put it, yet to be that's a question yet to be answered. We could do training materials and serials and news feeds and all kinds of things up there if we had a bit of time. We're talking about maybe just having an odd meeting once in a while, general meeting. So I'm not talking about the foundation of a new club, but just people like a special interest group, that Morse people that might want to get a little bit more proficiency or have a bit of a play without all the nasty comments you might get if you come up on air initially, and talking about new equipment. So we're looking at maybe Tranmere or somewhere like that, or we could be down the Shack or somewhere like that. It'd be nice to be a reasonably central location for everyone concerned. That's pretty much it. So if you've got any other questions on those things, but it's kind of just a little bit of a fishing expedition at this stage. I'd like to see, we've put things up on the air before, but we've been met with a stony silence. It'd be great if we had a few people who are interested that could probably initiate something, or could get something happening. Thanks.
Just in closing, and I wanted to make sure that Paul got his serve in before I brought this out, a little bit of show and tell. One of the other barriers to learning to send Morse code were the traditional keys. They called an up and downer, a pumper, straight key, this action. And it's how it all started, and it went right through to the end of the 90s when Morse was replaced internationally by other modes. Now, one of the things that that particular style of sending did was cause people to send nerve Morse instead of relaxed rhythm timing that I went on before. It also produced what I've got, not from Morse code, this is from computer operation, but RSI, glass arm it was called. So 8 years after the first Morse code key was invented, out came a key called a cootie key, or a side swiper. Now, I like to homebrew as much as I can. I've only got one effective arm, so don't go looking to rivet count because I don't do precision engineering, I'm not able to. But that was in a previous life a bread knife or a carving knife, and here's what happens. The cootie key was developed because those of us who were at sea and getting tossed around in some pretty big seas couldn't sit at a desk and send Morse like that because you'd be on the floor. So, I'll just put this down for a moment. These were developed, held in one hand, think about a hacksaw blade or an old knife blade. It's a side-to-side movement, not dissimilar to turning pages in a book. You tell me now they're obsolete, we don't turn them in our Kindles. Okay, you're wiping stuff on your tablets. Then get away from it. Have a think about it. If anyone wants to talk to me about this some more, please do. And if anyone wants to get something going up at the Shack and we'll commit to it, I'm happy to be involved in any way I can to help you get there. Thanks very much.
Okay, we'll have a break until 14:40. So you've got about 13 minutes. Have another cup of coffee. I think there might be still some drinks in the fridge. There's plenty of water. And back at 14:40 for the last three presentations. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I've got that one. You want that one? You want that one? If they want the real one for the thing.